Jake had always been a creature of habit. Every morning at exactly 7:30, he would walk into Bean There coffee shop, order his usual black coffee with 1 sugar, and claim the corner table by the window. This Tuesday morning was no different. Except for one thing, the place was absolutely packed. He managed to snag the last available table, a small round one near the back. Jake pulled out his laptop and checked his presentation one more time. Today's client meeting could change everything. For his small tech company, he'd been working on this project for months, and if things went well, they might finally land their biggest contract yet. The morning rush was in full swing. Every seat was taken, and people were standing around with their drinks looking frustrated. Jake felt a bit guilty taking up a whole table by himself, but he really needed the space for his work. That's when she walked in. The woman had long, dark hair and was carrying a leather bag that looked like it had seen better days. She stood near the entrance, scanning the crowded room with the look of someone who desperately needed coffee and a place to sit. Jake watched as she checked her phone, probably calculating if she had time to find another cafe. She walked past his table once, then twice. On the third pass, she stopped and looked right at him. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. She had the kind of smile that could light up a room, even at 7:45 in the morning. "Excuse me," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "I know this might sound weird, but would you mind if I shared your table? I've got a big presentation this morning and really need somewhere to work." Jake looked around the packed cafe, then back at her hopeful face. He wasn't used to strangers approaching him, especially not confident women who seemed so at ease with themselves. His usual response would be to politely decline and protect his space, but something about her made him nod instead. "Sure, no problem. You're a lifesaver," she said, pulling out the chair across from him. But instead of sitting there, she surprised him by sliding into the booth-style seat right beside him. "Hope you don't mind, but I work better when I can spread out a bit." Jake blinked in surprise. The booth was meant for 2 people, but sitting side by side felt more intimate than he'd expected. He could smell her perfume, something light and citrusy that made him think of summer mornings. "This might just become my favorite seat in the whole place," she said with a laugh, pulling out her own laptop. "I'm Riley, by the way." "Jake," he managed to say, still processing how naturally she'd claimed half of his space. Riley opened her laptop and immediately began typing with the speed of someone who had a million things to do. Jake tried to focus on his own work, but he found himself stealing glances at her screen. She was working on what looked like a marketing campaign for a local restaurant. "Creative director?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Marketing manager at a small agency downtown," she replied without looking up from her screen. "And you're clearly in tech, judging by all that code I'm pretending not to peek at." Jake laughed, surprised by her honesty. "Guilty as charged. Software. Development. Got a big meeting in an hour that could make or break my company." "No pressure then," Riley said with a grin. "What kind of software?" As Jake explained his project, a new inventory management system for small businesses, he noticed something strange happening. Usually talking about his work made him nervous, especially with strangers. But Riley asked smart questions and seemed genuinely interested. Before he knew it, they'd been talking for 20 minutes. "You know," Riley said, closing her laptop, "I should probably head out soon, but this has been the best morning I've had in weeks. Most people in coffee shops just stare at their phones." "Yeah, this was unexpected," Jake admitted. "In a good way." Riley gathered her things but didn't immediately get up. "Jake, can I ask you something? Do you come here every morning?" "Pretty much. Same time, usually the same table. I'm kind of predictable that way." "Predictable isn't bad," Riley said, standing. "But it's reliable, and reliable is underrated these days." She paused at the edge of the table. "Would it be weird if I showed up tomorrow morning? I mean, if you're planning to be here anyway." Jake felt his usual caution kick in. He didn't really know this woman, but then he remembered how easily they'd talked, how comfortable he'd felt despite her sitting so close to him. "Not weird at all," he heard himself say. "Great," Riley said, shouldering her bag. "Same time, same seat. And Jake, good luck with your meeting. You've got this." After she left, Jake sat there for a few more minutes, staring at the empty space beside him. The booth felt bigger now, quieter. He couldn't remember the last time someone had shown such genuine interest in his work, or made him feel so at ease, so quickly. His phone buzzed with a reminder about his meeting. Jake packed up his laptop, but as he headed for the door, he found himself already looking forward to tomorrow morning. For the first time in years, his predictable routine had room for something or someone unexpected. Walking to his car, Jake replayed their conversation in his mind. Riley had this way of making everything seem more interesting, more alive. She'd turned his quiet morning into something memorable without even trying. He had no idea that this chance encounter would change everything. All he knew was that tomorrow couldn't come fast enough, and for once it had nothing to do with work. The next morning, Jake arrived at being there at his usual time, but his heart was beating faster than normal. He'd spent the entire previous day thinking about Riley and wondering if she'd actually show up. Part of him hoped she would, while another part worried about breaking his comfortable routine. He ordered his black coffee with 1 sugar and looked around. The morning crowd was lighter today, which meant plenty of empty tables. Jake chose his usual spot by the window and tried to focus on checking his emails, but he kept glancing toward the door. At exactly 7:47, Riley walked in. She spotted him immediately and broke into that same warm smile that had caught his attention yesterday. Jake felt a strange mix of relief and nervousness as she approached. "Good morning, table buddy," she said cheerfully, ordering her coffee, before sliding into the seat right beside him, just like yesterday. "How did the big meeting go?" "Better than I could have hoped," Jake said, surprised by how natural it felt to have her there again. "We got the contract. My team was over the moon." "That's amazing," Riley said, and Jake could tell she genuinely meant it. "I knew you'd nail it. You had that quiet confidence thing going for you." Over the next week, their morning meetings became a routine. Riley would arrive a few minutes after Jake, claim what she started calling her seat, and they'd work side by side while making casual conversation. Jake learned that Riley had grown up in 3 different states because her dad was in the military. She discovered that Jake had taught himself to code by watching online videos because he couldn't afford college right away. "You know what I like about this setup?" Riley said one Thursday morning, gesturing to their shared table. "Most people sit across from each other like they're in some kind of business meeting. But this feels more, I don't know, like we're on the same team." Jake had noticed the same thing. Sitting beside Riley felt natural, like they were working together rather than just sharing space. He'd always been someone who needed his personal space, but with Riley, the closeness felt comfortable instead of crowding. Their conversations began stretching longer each day. Jake discovered that Riley loved documentaries about unsolved mysteries just like he did. Riley found out that Jake volunteered at a local animal shelter every weekend. They both had complicated relationships with their families and preferred small gatherings to big parties. "It's weird how much we have in common," Riley said one morning, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "I mean, what are the chances?" "Maybe it's not about chances," Jake replied. "Maybe it's about finally meeting someone who gets it." The real turning point came on a rainy Tuesday when the power went out at Riley's office building. She showed up at being there looking frustrated, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and her hair slightly damp from the rain. "Emergency situation," she announced, sliding into her usual spot. "I've got a huge presentation due this afternoon and nowhere to work. Please tell me you have good Wi-Fi at your place." Jake's apartment was his sanctuary. He'd never brought anyone from work there, let alone someone he'd known for less than 2 weeks. But something about Riley's genuine panic made him nod before he could overthink it. "Sure, but fair warning. It's pretty basic. Just me and my 2 cats." "Cats?" Riley's face lit up. "Okay, now I definitely need to see your place." An hour later, Riley was set up at Jake's kitchen table with her laptop, completely focused on her work. Jake had offered her his desk, but she'd chosen the spot right next to where he usually sat. It struck him how naturally she'd made herself at home. "Your cats are amazing," she said during a coffee break, scratching behind the ears of Pixel, his gray tabby. "And your apartment is so peaceful." I can see why you're so calm all the time." "You think I'm calm?" Jake laughed. "You should see me during a coding crisis. Even then, I bet you're the steady one on your team," Riley said. "Some people bring chaos everywhere they go. Others bring stability. You're definitely the stability type." As the afternoon wore on, Jake found himself stealing glances at Riley while she worked. She had this way of getting completely absorbed in her projects, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration. Every now and then, she'd mutter something to herself or gesture at her screen like she was having a conversation with it. "Done," she finally announced around 4 o'clock. "Crisis averted, presentation saved, and I probably won't get fired today." "Probably?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "Well, there's always tomorrow," Riley grinned. "But seriously, thank you. You totally saved me today. I owe you dinner or something." After Riley left, Jake's apartment felt different. Quieter, but not in the peaceful way he was used to. It felt empty. He kept expecting to hear her voice or see her sitting at his kitchen table. Even Pixel seemed to be looking around for her. That evening, Jake realized something had shifted. For years, he'd protected his space and his routine like they were precious things that could be easily broken. But Riley had walked into both and somehow made them better instead of disrupting them. His phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Thanks again for today. Your place really is the perfect work spot. Same time tomorrow at Bean there." Jake smiled as he typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." For the first time in his adult life, Jake was looking forward to sharing his space with someone else. And the strangest part was how right it felt. 3 weeks into their morning routine, Jake noticed something was different about Riley. She still showed up every day and claimed her seat beside him, but the easy confidence he'd come to expect was missing. Her usual bright smile seemed forced, and she kept checking her phone with a worried expression. "Everything okay?" Jake asked one Thursday morning after watching her stare at the same email for 10 minutes straight. "Just work stuff," Riley said quickly, closing her laptop a bit too fast. "You know how it is." But Jake could tell it was more than just work stuff. Riley's hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her coffee cup, and she kept tapping her pen against the table, a nervous habit he'd never seen before. "Riley," he said gently, "you know you can talk to me, right? I mean, we've been sharing a table for weeks now. That has to count for something." Riley looked at him for a long moment, and Jake could see her struggling with whether to open up. Finally, her shoulders sagged a little. "My boss called a meeting for this afternoon," she said quietly. "There are rumors about layoffs, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the list. I've only been at this job for 8 months, so I'm still the new person. And with the way I've been handling some of my recent projects..." She trailed off, staring into her coffee cup like it might have answers. "What do you mean, the way you've been handling projects?" Jake asked. "I made some mistakes last month. Nothing huge, but enough that I've been on thin ice ever since. And now with budget cuts..." Riley shook her head. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be dumping this on you. You've got your own business to worry about." Jake felt something twist in his chest. Over the past few weeks, he'd gotten used to Riley's strength and optimism. Seeing her like this, worried and uncertain, made him want to fix everything for her. "Hey," he said, reaching over to still her nervous pen tapping. "First of all, you're not dumping anything on me. Second, you're one of the smartest, most creative people I know. Any company would be lucky to have you." Riley gave him a small smile, but Jake could see she didn't quite believe it. The afternoon meeting went exactly as Riley had feared. She texted Jake around 3. "It's official. 2 weeks' notice, looking for new opportunities, as they say." That weekend, Jake's sister Amy was in town, and he'd promised to take her to their family's monthly dinner. As they sat in his childhood home, surrounded by the usual chaos of cousins and aunts arguing over whose potato salad was better, Amy studied him with the knowing look she'd perfected over 32 years of being his older sister. "So who is she?" Amy asked during a quiet moment on the back porch. "Who's who?" Jake tried to play innocent. "The woman who's got you checking your phone every 5 minutes and smiling at random moments. Come on, Jake, I've known you since you were born. You've never been good at hiding things from me." Jake sighed. There was no point in trying to fool Amy. Her name's Riley. We met at my usual coffee shop. And? Amy prompted. And nothing. We're friends. We share a table in the mornings. Amy raised an eyebrow. Just friends, huh? Is that why you've mentioned her name 4 times since I got here yesterday? Jake was quiet for a moment. The truth was he wasn't sure what to call what he and Riley had. They weren't dating, but it felt like more than friendship. They'd never talked about it directly, but there were moments when their hands would brush reaching for something or when she'd lean closer to show him something on her laptop that felt charged with possibility. It's complicated, he finally said. Because she has a boyfriend? Amy guessed. No, because I do, Jake said, then immediately regretted it when he saw Amy's confused expression. I mean, I did. Last year. David. We were together for almost 3 years. Amy's expression shifted to understanding. Jake rarely talked about David, even with family. The breakup had been messy and painful, ending when Jake discovered David had been seeing someone else for months. Jake, Amy said gently, that was over a year ago. David was a jerk who didn't deserve you. That doesn't mean you have to be alone forever. I'm not alone, Jake protested. I have my work, my routine, my cats, I'm fine. Being fine isn't the same as being happy, Amy pointed out. And from the way you light up when you talk about this Riley person, I'd say she makes you happy. Monday morning came, and Jake found himself arriving at Bean there earlier than usual. He'd been thinking about his conversation with Amy all weekend, and he wanted to check on Riley after her job situation. But when Riley walked in, she wasn't alone. She was with a tall guy in an expensive suit who had his hand on her back as he guided her to Jake's table. The man looked familiar, though Jake couldn't place him. Jake, Riley called out, but her voice had a strange quality to it. I want you to meet someone. This is Trevor, well, we used to date. Trevor extended his hand with the kind of confident smile that Jake instinctively distrusted. So you're the table buddy Riley's been telling me about. Thanks for keeping her company while I was traveling. Jake shook Trevor's hand, confused. Riley had never mentioned an ex-boyfriend, especially not one who apparently traveled for work. She avoided Jake's eyes as she sat down, but this time Trevor sat in the chair across from them instead of Riley taking her usual spot beside Jake. Actually, Trevor continued, I'm hoping to convince Riley to give us another shot. I've got a new job offer in California, and I'd love for her to come with me. Fresh start, you know. Jake felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. He looked at Riley, hoping for some sign that this wasn't what she wanted, but she was staring at her hands, folded on the table. That sounds great, Jake managed to say, though the words felt like they were scraping his throat raw. For the next 20 minutes, Trevor dominated the conversation, talking about his new job and his plans for the future with Riley. Jake sat there feeling like an outsider in what had become his favorite part of every day. Riley barely spoke, and when she did, it was quiet responses to Trevor's questions. Finally, Trevor stood up. I should get going. Big day ahead. Riley, think about what I said, okay? The offer won't wait forever. After Trevor left, an awkward silence settled over the table. Jake didn't know what to say. He felt betrayed, though he couldn't exactly explain why. Riley hadn't made him any promises, and they'd never defined what they were to each other. Jake, Riley started, but Jake was already gathering his things. I should get to work, he said, not meeting her eyes. Good luck with everything. As Jake walked away, he heard Riley call his name, but he didn't turn around. His chest felt tight, and he realized that somewhere along the way, his feelings for Riley had grown into something much deeper than friendship, and now it was too late. For the next 3 days, Jake avoided being there completely. He found a different coffee shop across town, one with uncomfortable chairs and bitter coffee, but at least he wouldn't have to see Riley there. Or worse, see her with Trevor. He threw himself into work, staying late at the office and taking on extra projects. His business partner, Luis, finally cornered him on Thursday afternoon. Okay, what's going on? Luis asked, sitting on the edge of Jake's desk. You've been here until 9 every night this week, and you look like you haven't slept since Monday. Just catching up on some things, Jake mumbled, not looking up from his computer screen. This wouldn't have anything to do with the woman you've been meeting at that coffee shop every morning, would it? The one you couldn't stop talking about last week? Jake's fingers paused on the keyboard. He'd forgotten how much he'd shared with Louise about Riley, how excited he'd been when she'd worked from his apartment, how he'd started looking forward to mornings for the first time in years. It doesn't matter, Jake said finally. She's getting back together with her ex. End of story. Did she tell you that? Jake thought about Riley's expression when Trevor had been talking about California, how quiet she'd been. She didn't have to. You saw the guy, successful, confident, offering her a fresh start. What could I possibly offer compared to that? Luis was quiet for a moment. Jake, you know I love you like a brother, but sometimes you're an idiot. Thanks for the pep talk, Jake said sarcastically. I'm serious. You've spent the last year building walls around yourself because of what happened with David, and the first person who manages to get through those walls, you're ready to give up on without even fighting for her? Jake finally looked up at his friend. What's the point? She's already made her choice. Has she, though? Or are you just assuming she has because it's easier than taking a risk? Meanwhile, Riley was having her own crisis. She'd been staying at her best friend Zoe's apartment since losing her job, sleeping on the couch and sending out resumes during the day. But she couldn't focus on job hunting because all she could think about was the hurt look on Jake's face when he'd walked away from their table. You're being ridiculous, Zoe said on Friday morning, watching Riley stare at her untouched breakfast. Just go talk to him. I can't, Riley said. You didn't see his face, Zoe. He thinks I chose Trevor, and maybe that's for the best. Why would that be for the best? Zoe asked, sitting across from her. Riley, I've known you for 5 years, and I've never seen you as happy as you were these past few weeks. Every morning you'd come back from that coffee shop glowing like you'd just won the lottery. Because Jake deserves better than someone who's unemployed and has no idea what she's doing with her life, Riley said, her voice small. Trevor's offering me security, a job connection in California, a chance to start over. That's the smart choice. Since when do you make choices based on what's smart instead of what makes you happy? Riley was quiet. The truth was, she'd been scared ever since Jake had let her into his apartment. Scared of how right it had felt to work beside him, how natural it was to be in his space. She'd never felt that comfortable with anyone before, not even Trevor during their 2-year relationship. What if I mess it up? Riley whispered. What if I let myself care about him, and then I ruin everything like I always do? Zoe reached across the table and took Riley's hand. What if you don't? What if for once you trust yourself and go after what you actually want? Saturday afternoon, Jake was at the animal shelter, cleaning kennels and trying to lose himself in the routine physical work. But even here, surrounded by barking dogs and the organized chaos of weekend adoptions, he couldn't stop thinking about Riley. He was walking a particularly energetic golden retriever named Buddy when his phone rang. Amy's name appeared on the screen. How are you doing, little brother? Amy asked when he answered. I'm fine, Jake lied automatically. That's what you always say. But Luis called me yesterday. He's worried about you. Jake stopped walking, and Buddy immediately began investigating an interesting smell near a fire hydrant. Luis called you? Why would he do that? Because apparently you've been moping around the office all week, and when Luis tried to talk to you about Riley, you nearly bit his head off. Jake sighed. His sister and his business partner ganging up on him was the last thing he needed right now. Amy, it's complicated. She's got history with someone else, and I'm not going to be the guy who gets in the way of that. Or maybe you're scared, Amy said gently. Maybe you're so afraid of getting hurt again that you're willing to walk away from something good before you even give it a chance. What if I am scared? Jake asked, surprising himself with his honesty. What if I put myself out there and she chooses him anyway? What if I'm just setting myself up for another David situation? Jake, listen to me. Riley is not David, and you're not the same person you were a year ago. You're stronger now, more confident. But more importantly, from everything you've told me about this woman, she cares about you too. After hanging up with Amy, Jake sat on the shelter's front steps with Buddy sprawled across his feet. Maybe his sister was right. Maybe he was letting fear make his decisions for him. His phone buzzed with a text message and his heart jumped when he saw Riley's name on the screen. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something. Can we meet? Not at Being There, somewhere neutral, please. Jake stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct told him to protect himself, to not give her the chance to hurt him more than she already had. But somewhere underneath the fear was a tiny voice that sounded suspiciously like Amy, telling him that some things were worth the risk. Typed back, Riverside Park by the duck pond, 1 hour. As he drove to the park, Jake's hands were shaking slightly on the steering wheel. He had no idea what Riley wanted to say, but he knew this conversation would change everything, one way or another. It was time to find out if he was brave enough to hear it. Jake arrived at Riverside Park 10 minutes early and found himself pacing near the duck pond like a nervous teenager. He'd been here countless times over the years, but today the familiar place felt different, charged with possibility and dread, in equal measure. When he saw Riley walking toward him, his breath caught. She looked nervous too, her hands shoved deep in her jacket pockets and her steps hesitant. But when their eyes met across the small distance between them, Jake felt that same spark he'd experienced on their first morning at Being There. Thank you for coming, Riley said when she reached him. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Jake admitted. They stood there for a moment, the awkwardness thick between them. Riley, about the other day. I need to say something first. She interrupted, then took a shaky breath. I told Trevor no. Jake felt his heart skip. What? The California job, the fresh start, all of it. I told him no. Riley looked out at the pond where a family of ducks was swimming in lazy circles. I realized something when I was sitting in that coffee shop with you and him. The whole time Trevor was talking about our future together, all I could think about was how wrong it felt. But he was offering you everything, Jake said, still trying to process what she was telling him. Security, a new career, a chance to start over. Riley turned to face him fully. Jake, can I ask you something? In all the mornings we spent together, did I ever seem like someone who played it safe? Jake thought about it. Riley, who had approached a stranger's table without hesitation. Riley, who had made herself at home in his apartment within hours of being there. Riley, who spoke her mind and took up space and never apologized for being exactly who she was. No, he said quietly. You definitely don't play it safe. Then why would I start now? Riley asked. Trevor represents everything I thought I was supposed to want. But the thing is, when I'm with you, I don't think about what I'm supposed to want. I just want. Jake felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. Riley, I need you to know that I'm not good at this. Relationships, I mean. My last one ended badly, and I spent a year convincing myself I was better off alone. And then, I came along and ruined your perfect routine, Riley said with a small smile. Actually, you made it better, Jake said. That's what scared me so much. I'd gotten comfortable being alone, and then suddenly I couldn't imagine my mornings without you there. Riley stepped closer to him. So what do we do now? Before Jake could lose his nerve, he reached out and took her hand. We start over. Properly, this time. No more assumptions, no more walking away when things get complicated. We figure it out together. I'd like that, Riley said, squeezing his fingers. But I should probably warn you, I'm unemployed, I'm staying on my friend's couch, and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. Jake laughed, feeling lighter than he had in days. I own a small tech company that barely breaks even. I talk to my cats more than most humans, and I haven't been on a real date in over a year. I think we're both pretty much disasters. Perfect. Riley grinned. Disasters belong together. 1 year later, Jake walked into Being There at 7:30 in the morning, just like he had every day for the past 3 years. But now instead of claiming a table for himself, he was looking for someone specific. Riley was already there, sitting at their old table by the window. She'd gotten there first today because she had an early video call with a client. 6 months ago, she'd started her own marketing consulting business working with small companies like Jake's. Her first client had been a local restaurant, and word of mouth had kept her busier than she'd ever imagined. "Morning table, buddy," Jake said, sliding into the seat beside her with 2 coffee cups. Black with 1 sugar for him, vanilla latte, for her. "You're the best," Riley said, accepting her coffee and leaning over to give him a quick kiss. "How did the late-night coding session go?" "Luis and I finally figured out that bug that's been driving us crazy for 2 weeks," Jake said. "We might actually launch the new software update on schedule." "I never doubted it," Riley said, and Jake could tell she meant it. Their morning routine had evolved over the past year, but some things remained the same. Riley still claimed the seat beside him instead of across from him. She still spread her work out across half the table, and Jake still found her presence comforting rather than intrusive. But now there were new elements too. Jake's apartment had become their apartment, with Riley's colorful artwork on the walls and her extensive collection of coffee mugs taking up half the kitchen cabinets. She'd insisted on getting a bigger dining table so they could both work from home comfortably, though more often than not they still ended up sitting side by side rather than across from each other. "I have something to tell you," Riley said, closing her laptop and turning to face him. "Remember that marketing conference in Denver I applied to speak at? The big one where you'd be presenting to like 500 people?" Jake asked. "Did you hear back?" They said yes. Riley's face was glowing with excitement. "Jake, they want me to give the keynote speech about building a business from scratch. Me giving a keynote." Jake felt a surge of pride so strong it almost overwhelmed him. "Riley, that's incredible. You're incredible." "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but also more excited than I've been about anything in years." "When is it?" 3 months from now. And here's the best part. They're covering travel expenses for my support team. Apparently, successful entrepreneurs always bring their people with them. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to be part of your support team?" "I'm asking if you want to take a long weekend in Denver with me and watch me either give the speech of my life or completely fall apart on stage. Either way sounds entertaining," Jake said, earning himself a playful swat on the arm. As they sat there planning their Denver trip, Jake marveled at how natural this all felt. A year ago, he couldn't have imagined sharing his space with anyone, let alone building a life with someone. But Riley had changed all of that, not by forcing her way in, but by showing him that the right person didn't disrupt your life. They enhanced it. "Jake," Riley said suddenly, "do you ever think about that first morning, when I just walked up to your table like I belonged there?" "All the time," Jake admitted. "I still can't believe you had the confidence to do that. You want to know a secret?" Riley leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I was absolutely terrified. I'd been standing by the counter for like 5 minutes trying to work up the courage to ask if I could sit with you." "Really? But you seemed so sure of yourself?" "Sometimes the best way to be brave is to pretend you already are," Riley said. "Besides, I had a good feeling about you. Something about the way you were sitting there, so focused and calm. You looked like someone I wanted to know." Jake thought about all the small moments that had led them here. Riley sliding into the seat beside him instead of across from him. The way she'd made herself at home in his apartment. How she'd called it her favorite seat, not knowing that she was really calling it home. "I'm glad you took the chance," Jake said. "Me too," Riley replied, settling back against his shoulder. "Best decision I ever made." As the morning rush began to pick up around them, Jake and Riley sat in comfortable silence watching the world wake up through their window. Some things had changed dramatically over the past year, but this, sitting beside each other, sharing space and coffee and quiet moments, this felt as natural as breathing. Riley's phone buzzed with a text and she glanced at it quickly. "Zoe wants to know if we're still on for dinner tonight," she said. "Tell her yes, but we're cooking at home. I found a new recipe I want to try." "At home," Riley repeated softly, like she was testing how the words sounded. Jake realized she was right. Somewhere along the way, his apartment had become their home, and his routine had become their routine. And his favorite seat wasn't at being there anymore. It was wherever Riley happened to be.